Good afternoon, and thank you for joining AOC's Black Minds Matter webinar. These are incredibly challenging times for our nation. It's also a time when more voices have risen to remind all of us that institutional racism exists, and we still have a long way to go to ensure that every person in this nation is treated with fairness, dignity, and respect. This week, as America remembers Congressman John Lewis, we want to shine a spotlight on an injustice that doesn't get enough attention. We can't look at institutional racism without acknowledging the vast disparity in outcomes that exists between white children and children of color in America, and between those children whose families have educational choice and those who don't. When there is a persistent achievement gap between white students and students of color, something is very wrong. When children from lower income families, predominantly children of color, are too often the ones trapped in perpetually failing schools, something is very wrong. Black minds matter. AFC remains unrelentingly focused on our mission to empower families with the opportunity to access a quality education for their children. And right now, we are heavily involved in an effort to get Congress to take action for all of America's children, not just some. The pandemic doesn't distinguish between public school children and private school children. Every child and every family is affected. Congress is now debating the next COVID relief package. There will be substantial new money for public schools, but this package must also include one-time assistance for private schools and families. 1.7 million children from lower income families are enrolled in private schools, and these schools are in danger of closing because of the pandemic. And if Congress had any foresight at all, they would also include a federal tax credit for contributions to scholarship granting organizations that would generate new funds for education and create educational opportunity for millions of students. We've known for decades that too many children of color are trapped in schools that don't meet their needs. The pandemic has only reinforced this reality. School is going to look different in a lot of places in the fall, but families in America, especially lower income families, need more than ever is greater flexibility and greater choice so that every child can get a full-time quality education. We need Congress to step up and act. Now, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Denisha Merriweather, who will introduce our great panel.
Thank you so much, John. And I am very excited to bring you guys this episode of Black Minds Matter with a dynamic panel. I published an article a couple weeks ago now and talking about the link between the racial and social injustices that take place daily in America that were sparked by the abhorrent murders of men and women in this country at the hand of police. I linked that to the prowl that the teachers union and the public education system has seemingly also prowled on Black minds as police have prowled on Black bodies. Those committed to protecting Black lives cannot simultaneously refuse to nurture Black minds. Our essence and our being deserve life. Our Black minds matter. I want to thank and bring in Dr. Steve Perry, Ann Duplessis, Hera, and Gerard Robinson. Thank you so much, guys, for joining. And I'm just going to jump right into it because we have so much to talk about, and I want us to have enough time. So, Gerard, we'll go to you first. Can you give us a little bit of history and background on government schools? So government schools, of course, they were not created for African Americans, but despite segregation and slavery, Black people created their own schools, created their own institutions of learning. Can you tell me a little bit about the history of schooling for Black? Did it start with Brown versus Board and kind of bring it into this modern day of school choice?
Denisha, first of all, thanks for inviting me to the show. I want to say hello to John and the AFC family. Been involved with the organization in different ways for 15 years, and glad they remain an important voice. So no, Black education did not start with Brown v. Board of Education and the decision in 54 and 55, although it definitely opened up the door for more Black people to have access to an integrated education. You really have to go back to post-Civil War period. W.E.B. Du Bois talks about this and the role that formerly enslaved Africans played in joining state-level Reconstruction government. And many of them believed that education was synonymous to liberation. And so they helped introduce and get signed into law what today we would call the first universal free public education, open to all, independent of race. And so that's post Civil War. But you can go back really to the 1700s when archaeologists were doing excavation work on the plantations of George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. Guess what they found? Today, what we would call tablets, and they would call pencils. And so the quest for Black education, however it's going to be administered, is older than the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the Declaration of Independence. In 2020, when we're talking about Black Minds Matter, it's really a centuries-old quest to show the link between education and liberation. And at no point did Black people not play a role in trying to make it happen.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And so also I want to make a plug for Gerard. We did another episode of Black Minds Matter, doing a deep dive into the history of schooling in America of Black people. And that video will be released next week. And so please do look out for that in the detailed history of schooling in America for Blacks. And so, Dr. Perry, Nick, I'll go next to you because you have a school, and from the history timeline that Gerard just gave us, there's been a lot of slow academic growth, insensitivity, low expectations, exposure rates, everything that seemingly not changed through the years. Why can Black children have the same quality of education as their white peers? Is that too high of a goal? Is that something that's achievable?
Well, 5 schools, but who's counting? The reason why we are where we are is because the American subconsciousness is rooted in white supremacy. We can hear people explain why children who are Black are not performing well in school. And on some level, even many African Americans can blame parents and poverty and resources and all these other things. The point is, we give people too many excuses to fail our children. I'll take it one step further. If only 6% of the children that we accept into our school in Harlem can read on grade level, how far have we come from Reconstruction? When only 6% can read on grade level. In these schools that employ people to live in the middle, and in some cases upper middle class, to live in the suburbs, to send their children to good schools, then how far have we come? The reason we are where we are is because too many people in positions of authority are convinced that Black minds don't matter. They're convinced that as a community, we don't even want an education. People will say that. When we opened our first school in Hartford, I was in a group of people and I was telling them we're about to open a school in the hood and we're going to send 100% of our kids to 4-year colleges. And I was in a beauty salon, not to fix my hair, but because I was there to drop something off at my wife, because as you know, when a Black woman goes to the beauty salon, she goes in on Friday night and somewhere around Sunday, you might see her again. So I had to go drop something off to, just to see if she was still alive. And when I was there, I was talking about our school. And when I did that, people of color were saying to me, these kids don't even want to go to school. And I'm like, but you're Black. And you're saying this. So what do you think white people are going to say? Even in our own community, many of us believe that we don't want an education. The issue is not that we don't want it. It's that what we're being handed day after day isn't an education. One of the reasons why kids don't want to read is because what they see in books is not themselves. And when they do see themselves, they see themselves in a subjugated position. So when they look at a book, they're like, okay, so either we're slaves or we are not. That's not for me. We have to open our own schools and our own communities so that what we can do is to create the desire or tap into the desire for education. I'll finish here by saying this. Go into any kindergarten classroom of any color and ask those kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? And watch and see with their cherub hands shoot into the air and say they want to be all these amazing things. Check on those kids in a failed school system just a year or two later, or 3. Because in America, we know that just 18% of all kindergartners are Black, and 48% of those children who are suspended out of school are Black. Our school system has not just failed us, but has set us adrift for failure.
Yeah. And I even think about gifted and talented. You say, oh, well, this is going to be a break to give Black students who are.
That just means white and middle class. Gifted and talented is something that we are. One of the reasons why we started our first school is because I was going to visit other schools. I was doing work as a social worker in other schools, and I could tell the level of classes by the color of the kids.
Right.
The higher the level, the whiter the class, the lower the level, the darker the children. Still the case in that same school.
I want to agree with you, Dr. Perry, because even me, when I was in kindergarten and I was in elementary school, and I would be in a class full of, I was like one of the 2 Black students in the class, and I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a neurosurgeon because I used to watch Gifted Hands, and I wanted to do so bad. And then when I got like into 1st and 2nd grade, I started to say, you know, I'm not really smart enough, and I don't think that I could do that, because only people I really see being a doctor or this in movies or even in books that I read are people that don't look like me. So am I really going to be able to get into this field? Like, do I have the mind to do these things? And it wasn't until I got to the school that I was in and I started meeting lawyers and doctors that looked like me, and I actually saw that these people were real, and it wasn't just people that didn't look like me, that, you know, the stereotype of who the doctors look like and who the lawyers and judges look like. So that actually gave me, you know, the drive to want to, you know, be, well, I didn't choose neurosurgery, as you can see, but I still found a field that I love and that I'm pushing for.
The work you're doing is bigger than brain surgery. You're creating the people who will create brain surgeons.
Yes. And Harold, let's tarry there with you for a minute. Tell us a little bit more about your story and how you got involved in education reform and why you think that other kids deserve the same opportunity.
Yes. So mine started really with my brothers, my 2 older brothers. They are both graduates. One's going to medical school and the other is and they were kind of like the test kids in our family. They were the first 2. And my parents didn't know, you know, how they were going to afford to put all of us to school, because there is a lot of us. So they looked around, and we lived an hour from any of the private schools, because I live in Apollo Beach in Florida, and all the main private schools that are good are in Tampa. So my parents were like trying to figure out how they would get us back and forth and everything like that. And so then they put it in their head that they were going to give us the best opportunities. They were going to give us the best education they could possibly give us. And it didn't matter how much money that they were bringing in, they were going to find a way. So they found a school called Academy Prep, and that's in Ybor in Tampa. And we ended up attending that school. And this school taught a grade level above whatever grade you were in. So you enter in 5th or 6th grade and graduate in 8th. And so I entered in 5th. So I'd be learning 6th grade math, 6th grade English, you know, so on and so forth. And when I first got there, I was struggling. You would think, oh, once you get to a school choice program, you're just going to have like A's, straight A's, and it's just going to be everything that you could imagine. But it was actually a struggle. And what made me realize, I didn't even realize it in middle school. I realized in high school how big of a help that was, because they taught me how to study, the way my mind works. I didn't know that I was a visual learner until the 7th grade. It took me 2 years in that school of just being miserable and not understanding how I studied to understand the information that I was given. So they really worked with me. My mom, my dad, I would stay up late with tears in my eyes, not understanding the information, but my teachers didn't give up. And my parents definitely didn't give up. And now I am where I am now. So the story is still going on. I'm in college and I'm a food science major, and I'm excited. I'm ready to get out there in my field and research. And I'm always thankful for what Academy Prep did for me. They were just, I don't know, I can't even explain. They were really amazing.
Yeah, no, that's a very great school, and they are doing some really awesome work. I went to grad school in Tampa, so I can really attest to it. And you received the Florida Tax Credit Scholarship, like me, to go to a private school. And so I think it's very awesome that although we might come from backgrounds with limited means, it doesn't mean that we have limited means in limited minds. I guess I'll keep with our saying. And because you come from a different background, you come from a background of banking and finance, different from the education reform space. Talk to us a little bit about how you got involved in ed reform and your thoughts on education inequality and how you think that is linked to economic mobility.
Well, thank you. And again, thank you to AFC for being such a tremendous advocate for our children and for this issue. It is very important that we're able to have a voice across this country with regards to the impact of having opportunities, better educational access for our kids. I came into this space, I guess, of education reform, of being so committed to it, really by accident. I was elected in 2004 to the Louisiana State Senate, and at the time didn't really realize or know what or why. Why was I there? Long story short, it became apparent to me that my purpose, I guess, in my being was to be able to advocate for kids that I'll never meet. Right? I believe, and to this day, I still say that my time in the Louisiana State Senate was positioned by God for future impact. And so I have three daughters. I have four granddaughters, and I've been blessed, and they have been blessed that we have not had to struggle with the how and why and when and where can I send my daughters or my grandkids. That they have had opportunities, and so I find that this is not something that I like to do. This is something that I am called to do. Now, as a banker, as a businesswoman, I have to hire talent, right? And when we think about this whole idea of Black minds and why it matters, because when we are looking at society and the people who have leadership roles in society in corporate America, what corporate America is looking for is, how are you going to contribute to me, right? Or how are you going to contribute to my team? And that contribution is very much so a component of opportunity to show that you can contribute. So I think that this whole discussion right now about Black Lives Matter, but more importantly, the contribution that me or I can give to you, to this country, to your company, that will create value, right? The contribution that I can give is also relevant and very important. And shame on me in corporate America if I don't understand that. And so we really do have to get to a point where the decision makers and the leaders in corporate America understand and believe. We've got to get them to a point that they believe that this is real, and that the contributions that an African American or a Hispanic or any other minority can give is critical.
Yeah. And now let's open it up. All of us just have a conversation about this, because when and you teed it up very nicely, because systemic racism has really eroded all aspects of Black society, Black culture, from talking about getting a job after you even graduate from high school, healthcare, especially during this time of COVID-19. You have religious discrimination and educational discrimination, Blaine amendments, and then you talk about, Gerard, all the time, the Southern Manifesto. How do we uproot this disease in our country?
There is no more systemic racist system than the American public education system. By its very design, it is rooted in the notion that you can only go to school where you live, which we know was established through a number of covenants and redlining and other practices that made it virtually impossible for Black people in particular to live any differently than many Native Americans who live on a reservation. We were actually put into government-sponsored neighborhoods where we could not get out. Even when we had the money to buy a house in another community, there were housing covenants that limited that. So by keeping the system that determines where you go to school rooted in where you live, you are supporting an inherently racist system. I say that to Joe Biden. You support an inherently racist system, brother. And you, every single time you fight to make sure that children are forced back into failure, not your own kids because they went to private schools, but Black people's kids go back to those schools, you are supporting the roots of systemic racism. And we as a country cannot just say that we think Black lives matter and keep sending Black children to watch their lives washed away by the failures of the underperforming at best and failed school systems at worst. We know better. It's actually bizarre that we're still having this conversation. You hear some people say, well, school choice is something that the right wing has chosen. Well, damn it, if people who you think are racist even agree to this, it's like watching George Floyd be choked out and murdered. Even the most ardent racists like, yeah, that one right there was pretty bad. So when even they can see what's happening to our community and you progressives can't, you liberals can't, how ridiculous do you sound? And finally, you as parents, don't send your kids to these raggedy behind schools. You would never, ever. You might volunteer at one. You might say that you support them, but you'd never put your own child in them. So we know what the roots of racism are. The same people who teach those cops that it's all right to murder Black people teach our kids that we're supposed to succumb to that same system. The same system that teaches Black people and white people that George Washington was a hero more than he was a villain, a slave owner. That system is the system that we must do everything in our power to put to rest. Because someone said to me today on Twitter, they said, you need to stop with all that anti-public school rhetoric. God damn it. What am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to be pro something that's destroying my community? What are you smoking? Anybody who's against my community, I'm against them. How about that?
But to that point, I think that it is even more important that we find a way to help our minority elected officials to understand that as well.
They're the ones who benefit from it the most, because so often, sister, you know as well as I do, they represent the hood, but they don't send their kids to those same hood schools.
Absolutely.
I'm in the state legislature. I find them because I know where you send your little Jack and Jill. I know, and you know. Since we all know we send your little Jack and Jill, we're going to hold you accountable, because all I want for the poor kids is what you have for yours. I don't want any more.
And that is my point. I mean, my point is we have an opportunity with the folk that have been elected that are supposed to represent us, right? We have opportunity to have more voices, and we don't. And so in addition to this fight about trying to convince white people that Black Lives Matter, we got to convince our own people that Black Lives Matter, right? We have to convince our own people. And that, to me, is the challenge, right? Because we now have a lot of smart Black folk, people who then got big degrees and are in big positions, but it's still, I got mine. Right. So in addition to this conversation that we're having about white people, we know where they are. Not they, I hate to say, I don't want to say that. I mean, we know where some are, right? But what we need to do is put Black people on the carpet, especially those who are in a position to be able to have a voice.
Every state that has a robust school choice sector has a Black and Latino caucus who supports choice. Every state, every state. The linchpin in this conversation, it's not the progressive white people and it's not the racist white people. It's Black legislators who benefit from school choice themselves, and in many cases went to a school of choice when they were coming up. They were in some sort of program that they got put on, and so they actually benefited from that. But then they say, well, I support public education. Stop it.
One of the great things about our conversation about Black Lives Matter and about public policy, and I want to thank Andy Blesses for her work in the legislature. She was also a former board member of mine. I was president of BAO. Is the role that Black lawmakers actually played in making parental choice a reality for thousands of children. Most people don't know that Polly Williams, a Black Democrat in Milwaukee, she's the one who decided to work with a Republican governor, white Republican governor in Wisconsin, to say, let's create the Milwaukee Parental Choice Program, first urban-based program focused on low-income kids in the country. Guess what? Black, brown, white, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, other students benefit from that. You look at New Orleans, Andy Plessis could tell you a great story about that, along with Representative Badon. You look at Cleveland. Now, remember, the Supreme Court in 2002 ruled in favor of private school choice in the Zelman case. That was in Cleveland. It was Fannie Williams, a Black elected city council member from Cleveland, who said, listen, we've got to do something different than what we have. And you move to DC, it's a Kevin Chavez, it's then a Mayor Anthony Williams. It's people like, at that time, Secretary Rod Page. So we've got plenty of examples of Black people who've actually used their power and their influence to introduce parental choice. And introducing parental choice doesn't mean you're anti-public education. It means you're pro-learning and you're pro-choice. So that's part one. I'd also have to say that if we talk about education, and Steve and Ann hit on this, we talk a lot about white flight and what happened in cities after Brown v. Board of Education, after a number of Supreme Court decisions and housing covenants in the 70s. It's true that we had white flight, but the reasons our schools aren't failing is because whites are flying. The whites who wanted to fly have already flown. We've got to talk about the Black exodus of the middle class from our own commitment to our traditional public schools and others. And so there's definitely a class dynamic within the Black race that we got to talk about as well.
When we talk about Black electeds who support school choice, y'all might remember this dude from Hawaii, Barack Obama, who supported school choice and took the charter school sector from 1.5 million children to 3.3 million children. That brother who never sent his children to a public school in his life and who didn't attend one in his life. We remember that. Look, I got the Essence covers too with he and his wife, and I was there in Black Camelot too. But let's call it what it is. His support of school choice made opportunities available for millions of Black kids. This conversation is not about whether or not families believe that schools should be selected by the family. This is because the teachers union, the overwhelmingly white female teachers union, is seeing our self-determination as an existential threat to their existence. Let's go right to the numbers. There are 3.2 million children currently in charter schools, just charter schools in the United States of America. That's about 160,000 teachers just teaching in mainly non-union classrooms. That means that the teachers union is not getting the extortion that they typically get from teachers' checks. So what that means is they're losing $240 million a year in receipts. That's all it is.
Yeah. Steve, can you tarry there and talk about the difference between the teachers' unions and teachers? Because I can't believe how many teachers that I come in contact with who are offended when you talk about school choice, But this is two different conversations. Yeah, the quality of teachers needs to be addressed, but that in the teachers union, can you just talk to us a little bit what the difference is?
Well, let me say this because I know that polling tells us that we're not supposed to talk about the teachers union. I don't care. I really don't. This is the deal. As long as you as a teacher are silent about the behavior of your union, then you're complicit in the destruction of our Black community. And I don't care what color you are. And when you don't hold the people in your union who take hundreds of dollars out of your check per month, when you don't say to them, hey, man, you know what, we really don't have a problem with families choosing the best school for them. When you don't do that, you're complicit. So I'm holding you accountable too. You want to be separated from the bad behavior, these mafioso style tactics that they use, then hold them accountable, because I'm going to hold them accountable. I can only make distinctions when I see distinctions. When I see a distinction, when I see people standing up and saying, I can't justify not teaching children online because I know that hurts them. When I hear people justifying the silence that's occurred during COVID and children just sitting there languishing with nothing to do, I gotta hold all of them accountable until such time as they hold their union bosses who are literally millionaires. Randy Weingarten is a millionaire. Like straight up, like a garden variety, like a for real millionaire who lives in a very wealthy community because she can. We got to hold these folks accountable, because in the interim, our children are dying. It's like, this is not metaphor. They're legit dying because we're not giving them access to the education that they.
I mean, you know, and the thing, I think the point that you're bringing up is absolutely on target, but isn't it all relative to self, right? Is it the reason that some of these educators are not speaking up, and because they feel that there's some safety net for self there? I mean, we see that across the country with in rural America, where because the education and the public school system is perhaps the largest employer of that community, right? That they're not going to speak up because all of a sudden it's about self now. It's about self-preservation. And so I think that, the teachers have to be educated. I mean, here in Louisiana and New Orleans, we have been fortunate enough, I guess, to have been able to create our own system, right? That creation of public school, our system of schools. I mean, we're 100% charter, right? And so what that means is that all the teachers that we have, there is no union backing them, right? They get it, they understand. So, I mean, and so there is no fear of self. It's just a fear of, if we don't do this thing the right way, if I don't teach, if I don't perform, if I don't have the right results, I might lose my job. Well, guess what? If my loan officers don't do their job, they may be out of a job, right? Because
if the hairdresser doesn't do her job, she's going to be out of a job. We hold hairdressers
absolutely.
Than we do people teaching children.
Absolutely.
You know, our issue is that we don't hold, this is a person teaching your child, man. Like, right. That's their job, to teach your child. Here's what the problem lies. The problem lies that many of us know teachers. And because we know teachers, we know them as sisters, brothers, uncles, aunts, fathers, mothers, and the like. And we think because we like them, love them, and think that they're fantastic people, which they may very well be, that they're also fantastic at their job. And that's not true.
No, and that's so bad, but so sad, because bad and sad, because I mean, when I think about it, I know when I was in the legislature and I was fighting this issue, right? And I had to go and look at school board members, you know, or other teachers who were on the other side. And, you know, my first question was, where do your kids go to school? And not one could say that their kids or their grandkids were in the public schools that they were trying to protect, right? I'm gonna tell you, my mom was a public school teacher in Plaquemines Parish, Louisiana. But guess what? She didn't put me in a public school.
There's a Board of Education member in Hartford. The school system within which we started our first school, his name is Craig Stallings. Yes, I'm calling names. His name is Craig Stallings, still on the Board of Education there. He told me in my office that any board member who sends their child to a Hartford public school should be arrested. His words, not mine. This man is just like so many others, hypocrites to the core. And until such time as we call them out by name, why are we being polite with people who are destroying our community from the inside? We're talking about real children not living, because at some point we know 74% of children who do not read by third grade on grade level will never read at grade level in their lives. We also know that those children have the highest probability of being suspended, expelled, or dropping out. And we also know, therefore, 75% of all children who are incarcerated can't read.
Yeah. Kara, I see you trying to say something.
Yes, I have a question. My question would be to everybody in this call is, I hear all the time from different people, like my classmates, my family. I hear on the news outlets, on Twitter and everywhere, and everybody's giving, opinions and, facts and, what they think. But for us, me as a young person, and my question would be is, what is the solution? Because, everybody has their opinions and everybody has this and everybody's saying this. And as a young person, driven by facts and stuff like that, is like, what is the solution? I'm hearing like certain things, but like, what can be done to solve these issues?
Let me tell you, I think, I had this conversation with an AFC staff member. I shall not call names, but I had this conversation with an AFC staff member, and the conversation went something like, we can work a lot and very hard with trying to find better educational opportunities for children of color or low-income kids. And they can get that education, just like you're getting that education. But what happens the morning after? What happens when it's time to now apply for that position? And if we have not found a way to change the mindset of the people who are running these companies, the people who are running these organizations, right? The ones who are hiring. If we don't figure out how to do that first, then it's not going. It does matter, but it's not going to matter, because no matter what mind our Black families kids may have, they won't get a chance to prove it. The second thing is we have to find a way simultaneously to change the minds of our Black families, where education is the priority, right? Where they are spending more time, instead of at the hairdresser for 2 days, that they're spending 2 days reading to their kids, right? And so we've got to, it ain't just them changing, we got to do some changing as well, right? And we got to make sure that, as Dr. Perry says, we have to call it out, even if it hurts.
So let me say to some very specific answers to your question, and you truly are what we all work for, a young sister who's powerful and capable and standing at the precipice of changing the world. So I can't wait to hand over the reins of this work that we do to you. So the first thing that we have to do is we have to fight for universal school choice, which has to be money follows the child, period. Just the same way we fight for increased financial aid, Medicaid, Medicare, all those things, we have to fight for money to follow the child, and specifically for universal school choice. Like we want to have universal health care. You should not be bound by where you live to health care, to where you go to school and the like. So that's that. The second thing, in order to do that, we have to identify legislators or people who wish to run for office who support that. There can be no equity without creating opportunity for children to learn. So we must make sure that we fight for those legislators who understand, if nothing else, that they're going to send children to the best schools for them, and their parents get to make that decision. We have to fight the hypocrisy of what is often those people call themselves the left, the progressives, who would, on the one hand, say that they fight for the woman's right to have a child, but when she has a child, they don't want her to have the right to decide where the child goes to school. By fighting for that, that means that you, as young people who may not have the money, you have to volunteer on campaigns of those people who are fighting for school choice. You have to identify those individuals and you have to support them. In addition to that, you have to tell your story and say, hey, you know what, my family had to send me to a school that wasn't in my neighborhood because the neighborhood school wasn't for us. And that's what people do. That's what middle class people do. They first move to a neighborhood that they think they have a good chance, and they up their opportunities by saving money in tax deferred savings, like a CHET program in Connecticut, where you can put money away to send your child to a better school. And then what we have to do is we have to hold people accountable, call people out. When you know that a Black or Latino, white, Asian, or other legislator does not send their child to the schools within their district and is voting against school choice, you have to call them out by name, put their faces out on Twitter, put out a full page ad in your local newspaper. Make sure that people know this person's a flaming hypocrite, that they're doing something to your child that they would not do to your own. I run Capital Prep schools. Both of my sons go to Capital Prep. Well, now one graduated and he's going to go to University of Pennsylvania. But I send my kids to my school. I eat what I serve. And so if those people don't eat what they serve, then you have to call them out. And the final part is this. We cannot relent until every single child in the United States of America is going to the best school for them. I don't care if it's public or private, because the notion of private and privatization is something that only fulfills the minds of those people who don't understand what the lie is that they're being told. Public education is a method of delivering education. It's not a destination. Therefore, you don't have to go to LSU to have a public education. There's so many other schools in Louisiana. Similarly, those people who say that they fight for public education, if the kid got into Yale, they send them there. If they got into Hampton University, they send them there. Two private institutions. They say, I don't want my money to go to a religious school, but if they got into Georgetown, you'd send them there. So we have to fight the hypocrisy, and we have to put people in office who fight for our kids to have access to a quality education. I'll finish here. Dr. King said that the American schools do not know what to teach or how to teach. He said that, not me. And he said that we should create educational parks, which he said are schools that are outside of the neighborhood where we send our children to school. Sound like charter schools and magnet schools to me.
Right. But what would you
say? Oh, go ahead.
Oh,
okay. So what would you say? Okay, so I get all that. So what would you say to us? You know, we're about to us students that are graduating college and going in to apply for jobs and stuff like that. And you said that we have to, call people out and do certain things like this. But a person like me, like, let's say, I don't really post certain things because, like how Ann said, afraid of losing jobs. But students like us, coming from college and are starting to apply to jobs, what would you say to us in terms of how?
I would tell you this. Any organization who doesn't want you as you don't want to be there. Ain't no money. All money ain't good money.
Yeah, but that's not the reality, Dr. Pan. I hate to. That's just not the reality. The reality is that the majority of the opportunities are led by people who are not of color, right? And so what has to happen is you have to be smart about it, right? You have
What's not the reality? Hold on. What's not a reality?
I don't want to get you.
I got 200 employees. What ain't a reality?
You
be all right.
He can't come work for you.
Why can't you?
She has got to be smart with it, right? We've got to be smart.
And nobody go out there and take nudes. Everybody's telling her to put nude pictures of herself. If she's going to fight for her community and her employer is not going to support that, then at some point or another, that's going to find its way into the ethos, and as a result, they're going to lose her job anyway.
My thought is that unfortunately, the space we are in today with Black Lives Matter and how we are now are incorporating people of all colors, people of all economic statuses. We have people who don't want to say they care, but are now realizing they have to care, right? This is not going to happen overnight, right? And so I think that, you know, unfortunately, we are in a space that is beginning, and I'm being very optimistic.
Sister,
And
you
if,
gotta speak your truth. You better speak your truth and stand on it, and know that if you can't stand by it, and nobody telling you to say something inappropriate or disrespectful to yourself, anybody, but when you, because Black Twitter is a beast. When Black Twitter wants somebody, they can get them. And I'm telling you now, you as a young person have the opportunity to speak truth to power. Imagine if John Lewis took that same approach of watching what he said, or Martin King said that.
but guess what? Black Twitter ain't hiring her. So
You know who will? You know who will? Anybody who respects her right to speak her truth. And again,
so let me cut in here because it's a helpful conversation. You know, Hera, and I appreciate you posing this question. Hera is one of the Future Leaders Fellows within the American Federation for Children. There are 13 of them. She's a part of, she's one of 13 for the 2020 cohort. And this is something that is a beneficial question because her generation, I got a tax credit scholarship too as well, but her generation is coming up in an atmosphere and in a reality where choice is normal. And parents are now, especially in Florida where we're from, are growing up in a time where you can pick up and leave, get a scholarship, don't use your scholarship, go to a charter school, try a magnet school, you could do anything. And so the question of, you know, how do I make sure I'm really giving enough attention to this education reform conversation without being so, I guess, controversial. Yeah. I think it's a very tight line to walk. And it's a very valid question because your perspective and where you're coming from, you're just starting out. So if you post something on Twitter bashing an elected official, and then the very next session you want to go work under the government, then your vet might not be
very smart.
I'm
not saying hi.
I'll get back to that point about a job. Let me go back to your original question, then I'll weigh in on the part about a job in terms of solutions. Every solution are kind of baked into how you define the problem. So there are 4 R's that I walk. So no matter what solution you look for, there are 4 R's you're gonna have to walk. Number 1 is reading. In the 70s, there was a campaign called Reading is Fundamental. In 2020, reading is fundamental. Steve's already identified that. We've got over 30 million adults who can't read above the 8th grade level. We might define that as functionally illiterate. And talked about the talent pipeline. I have friends of mine, I know business owners who said, listen, we're not talking about high school students, we're talking about adults for 30s, 40s, 50s. So reading is important. And for the 3rd grade holdback policy, you know, Florida has a policy that if you can't read at a certain level by the 3rd grade, you can be held back. And there's research to show that the students who were kept behind that 1 year, in fact, are on par and at times surpass their peers by the time they reach the 8th grade. So we've got some examples of how to make reading work. So reading is important. Number 2 is resources. All the conversations about education is a money conversation, but it's always about revenue, hardly ever about expenditures. We spend billions of dollars on schools. At least 30 states have education K-20 as the #1 line item in the governor's budget. So we have money, maybe not dispersed as much as we would like, but I ask everyone, take a look at your local school budget. Should be online, and read it. Whether you're at a public school or if you're at a private school, ask for the budget. Resources matter. Don't get caught up just in revenue. Look at expenses. The 3rd R is relationships. We spend a lot of time talking about teachers, and we know teachers matter. Having a teacher teach in his or her subject, making sure we have national board certified teachers, the great work that Peggy's doing with her organization in DC. We've also got to talk about principals. A number of teachers say they leave the profession not because of the money solely, but because of the relationship with the leader. So there are organizations that are investing money into principals. And so principals have to be a part of this conversation because they set the tone and the policy. And the last part is race, since we're talking about Black people. You know, there are a lot of Black people who have gone on to earn Marshall Scholars, who are Rhodes Scholars, who are Presidential Scholars. They started off in low-income neighborhoods. They were the first in their families to go to school. Those 4 R's are applicable to parental choice programs, but they're equally applicable to public schools, where the majority of our Black children for the foreseeable future will go to school. And so let's look at examples of schools, public schools, that have turned around for low-income Black kids and have helped them move from poverty, or what I call promise, to prosperity, and use those as examples to figure out what we can do for our traditional public schools as well.
Yeah, man, I cannot believe time is already almost coming to a close. This is crazy. There was somebody commented, and I want to read his comment. He said that if sanitation workers were as unaccountable as the teacher union, we will all be doused in trash. And I think that about sums it up, because that is that's
Yeah.
No, that's not the case. We wouldn't do that. What we would do is we would find a way. We would either pick up our own trash. A group of us would get together and find out a way of how to make sure we take the trash and deliver it elsewhere. We would find a solution. Right now, with millions of children out of school, parents right now are finding ways to fill the gap because they don't have it. I understand the example, but I believe in the entrepreneurial spirit, and particularly with Black people, we make ways out of no ways.
No, that brings me to my next question. That's great. I didn't even see that link, but because right now during COVID-19, parents are educating their kids at home. We did a survey, 50% said they would continue homeschooling their kids. Black people said they will continue homeschooling their kids. And I think that's a link between all of the protests and people saying, wait a minute, I can do 10 times better than what I saw happening or what I think my kid is doing. What's you guys' thoughts on there as we continue, as we bring it to a close?
I think I'm sorry. I think the whole concept, the ability to choose, right, is important, and the ability to have the financial resources for that choice. But the reality is there are only going to be a select amount of families who can make that choice to homeschool. Most of our families, especially the ones that we are passionate about, are low income. And that means that they have not one, but two, perhaps, jobs, right? And so we struggle here at the bank with this notion of how do I, when a significant portion of my workforce, single parents, single mothers, right? Who, if they are a UBA, or the new term UBA, a teller, you got to be here. You can't work from home. You can't work remotely, right? And so, and so, how do I tell that single parent, that single mom, guess what? You gotta. I need you here. So you don't have a choice. Your kid may have a choice, but you don't have a choice. You got to be entrepreneurial. You got to figure it out, right? And that really is the vast majority of the people who don't have financial resources to be able to have a choice.
So we separate the race and the class issue, and those two do get linked up together a lot of times. So we're not.
Yeah, the homeschooling is not a viable option for as many people as who would like to have it, and that's just the truth. Not just because of there's the financial burden. Without money following the child in a very real sense, there you are punting on a number of, at least one person is not going to work in your house, which is a lot in most people's homes. And then there are the ramifications of not working. And many of the families that I do know that homeschool, they have 2 and 3 and 4 kids. And so those kids do make it to college, but then how do you deal with the fact that for the past 20 years, only one person's been earning an income, which is a real burden. But the other side is that not everybody can teach. Just because you know how to do something doesn't mean you know how to show somebody else how to do it. And then there's that. And so that takes us back to what we have to have. We haven't talked much about COVID, but I will say this: never would I call a pandemic anything other than a pandemic. On the same token, what it has also done is presented us with an opportunity to look reimagine education, an opportunity that we should have taken a generation ago, and to create access to the same type, like this device that we're using, this strategy that we're using, could be used to teach any and all subjects. When I want to know how to brine a turkey, I go and I Google it, and I go to YouTube and I watch the video that's 4 minutes, and it shows me how to do something that takes 72 hours to do, and then I do it and I learn it. What we have to do is we have to push the idea of education beyond the limits of what we've seen in the brick and mortar space. And that is a way that we could bridge the gap between what people are doing in the traditional schools and what people wish to do from a homeschool. We could create a menu where you can a la carte your way of services through the educational experience. So you could take a class in Louisiana, you could take a class in North Texas, you could take one at Harvard, and then you could take one at your local school system, and you put those together to create what becomes your child's academic experience. Gone are the days. We're not going back. I mean, we in our schools, we're buying 2 cameras for each of our classrooms. We are creating basically mini studios in which we're going to teach virtually. We're going to have an English teacher in one school in one city, and she's going to be teaching across multiple cities. And we're going to invite y'all to be a part of it, because it's an opportunity for us as a school to be able to educate children outside of our zone, not just in our city, but in our state. So we have to continue to push for universal school choice. We have to continue to push for money follows the child. And just because someone like President Trump says something about it, we can't abandon what is right. Just because even a stop clock is right twice. So just because that clown ends up on something that we've already been fighting for, that doesn't mean we abandon it. It means we just say, hey, okay, this clown agrees. So we shouldn't change our perspective because somebody who we find reprehensible agrees with us. We can create opportunities for those families who are at home to have access to a school that is real, and pods and other opportunities through these devices. We are on the precipice of something so majestic and so powerful. We need to mash the gas, as they say down south, and go further and faster than we've ever gone before. This is what we should be celebrating where we are right now in education.
Yeah. So let's, Gerard, before you say, I'm going to announce, if you guys have questions, we'll try to get in about 2. Okay, go ahead, Gerard.
No, I'll make it quick. Black homeschoolers are one of the fastest growing demographies within that category for all the reasons that people mentioned. But there's a difference between homeschooling and schooling outside of school that happens to take place at home. There's a whole out of school time component of this. 8 to 3 is part of learning, but we now have families who have Ys, Boys and Girls Clubs, other things closed. And so the YMCA, for example, their CEO was on television. He talked about how he's working with families and schools and parents to figure out ways of providing education even outside of what we call traditional school.
We've always had that, brother, through upward bound programs, through Boys and Girls Clubs, through all those. Before there were charter schools and magnet schools, there were upward bound programs. There was the trio programs. There were all these programs. There were the prep for prep. There was the A Better Chance. There were all these things we did. There were the church programs that you would stay after school. Many religions have these after school programs. That the Muslims have it. Jewish people have it, and then many cultures have it. Many Chinese cultures, they have it. And so it's the school that takes place after school that they go to, in some anywhere from 2 hours to 4 hours, and then on the weekends. We've always seen these things happen, and we, especially as African Americans and Latinos and then poor people among them, we too often lean so heavily on a failed school system that it does what it always done, which is it fails us. It doesn't have the integrity to support us.
And so in this moment, let's do what we've been doing since we got here 1619 moving forward, is make a way out of no way. Black people should have invented Uber. The number of cabs that passed us in the 90s, we should have invented Uber.
Or
I think there'd be 5 other things. But anyway, we can invent something in this time. Thanks.
Yeah, you are right about that, Gerard. The amount of people that hung out at the grocery store when I was growing up, that was unofficial Uber.
Right.
They weren't a part of the taxi service or anything. Right. Just chilling out. Can I take you? Y'all, your family need a ride?
So you Black minds and millennials, here's your opportunity to create the entrepreneurial idea for us.
But my other question was, my last question, obviously, but my other question was, when you're saying homeschooling and having, I meant to say, I was asking you this, but when you said you were like putting cameras and stuff like that in your classrooms to like have virtual settings for people at home and stuff like that, what about the kids that, like my sister, she really sucks at learning online. Like, so I had to become the homeschool teacher when my parents were at work, and teaching her algebra because she needed help. So what would you say about students like in this time of COVID-19? What do they do when it comes
So
to
nothing is for everyone. Let me start there.
Mhm.
right?
And then let me go to, I don't know that she sucks at learning online. It just may be the way that she was taught. That person may suck at teaching online. So we can't presume that this device is inherently good or bad. Too many of the lessons that are created for the brick and mortar experience, where you stand up in front of somebody and you tell them what to do. But the example that I use is a real example about brining turkey. I, in 4 minutes, learned how to brine a turkey because someone showed me how to do it on the internet. They showed me how to do it. They talked me through it. They did this. And the same thing can happen with every other subject. The reason why the Khan Academy has been so successful for tens of millions of children the world over is because when you get someone who knows how to explain it the right way, meaning what's right for you, then that device is no longer a limit, but in fact an opportunity. So I'm saying to you that no, online is not for everybody, nor is brick and mortar for everybody. And I'll say this really quickly. When we went 3 days after we closed for COVID, we were 100% online, 6.5 hours of instruction, live instruction all day, every day. For some of us, we did a good job. In some of our classes, we did a good job. Not in all of them. Not in all of them. But that's not because of Zoom or this device. That's because we needed to do a better job of prepping some of the adults who were doing these lectures to do a better job of using this device more effectively. It wasn't the device that failed. It was we, the humans.
But what isn't this the core of what we're advocating for? That kids learn differently, and that there's no one size that fit all. But the thing that is the challenge is that parents can be entrepreneurial in their thinking of a solution, but in most often the resources or the money that doesn't follow that solution. And so I think that's where we are today. What we have been fighting for, what AFC has fought for, what this whole idea of allow the money to educate our kids, however it is we need to educate them, to follow them, right? Allow me, if I can think entrepreneurial, right, and figure it out, then I should be able to get the resources to pay for it. It's kind of like unfunded mandates, right? And so that's where we are today. This is a great question because you have summed it up, with that question.
I don't know your sister's situation, but it made me think of two groups of people we can't overlook in all communities, particularly the Black community. Students with disabilities. They have been tremendously impacted by this because some of them learn primarily in a setting where there is an adult and not something virtual, and others have as well. We've got 6 million children in the United States with a disability. This is the 30th year of the signing of the American Disabilities Act. So we've got to remember them. We also have to remember the large number of Black kids in rural school districts. We only often think urban because, I've lived in urban areas, but there's a rural dynamic that we also have to consider when we're thinking about how to reach out to students.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much. I had so much to talk to you guys about. And because this was a dynamic and such an informative panel discussion, we're just going to have you back. I'll probably do this again. So we are definitely going to keep the conversation going. Thank you guys so much. Again, just an announcement, the Black Minds Matter series will have another of Gerard doing a deeper dive into history of education. And you can find out that information on our Eventbrite also. And we have continued out the series to talk about more important issues. So thank you guys so much. Give yourselves a round of applause because this is great.
And we're giving both of you a round of applause. So thanks for your leadership. Thanks, John.
Yeah.
I'll kick it over to you, John.
All right.
Great. Thanks, Denisha. Man, what a great conversation. Many thanks to Denisha, Gerard, and Dr. Perry and Hera. And many thanks to those of you who joined us. We've got a lot of work to do out in the states, and we're going to be working on governors and state legislatures. But as I mentioned earlier, right now, Congress has an opportunity over the next several days to help all of America's school children. And we need your help to convince them. You can help AFC Growth Fund with our work to help every child access a quality education. If you send a donation to AFC Growth Fund in the next 10 days, it will be matched on a one-to-one basis. Text contribute to 52886. We also urge you to contact your senators and congressmen and urge them to help all K-12 kids and support school choice in the COVID relief bill. You can text SCN to 52886. Again, many thanks to our panel, to Denisha, and thanks to all of you for joining us. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.